And we are back. Hello, welcome to another edition of Hi Guys History.
Hello. How are we all doing?
Yeah, not too bad. I think you'll notice this week that it will have a bit of a quiet absence. Yeah, it's going to be.
We're celebrating and we're all just hanging out.
We sadly failed to procure a fourth guest or a fifth guest, even for that matter, for this week's edition.
We've had five guests the last 2 weeks, though, so I feel like it kind of evens out.
We've expired. Well, we've run out of friends essentially.
Yeah.
Sadly, the truth is that we are very unpopular individuals. Hence why we've got time to run a radio show.
Yeah.
About history, for
Radio
God's sake.
show.
Yeah, I know.
Harry, of course, not salty at all about being dragged into this enterprise, but
No,
it's
I'm very happy to be here. Just lamenting our lack of friends, or failing that even acquaintances. I mean, it's quite shameful, really.
yeah. Well, it's week 10, 11.
Yeah,
Yeah.
11.
People are busy. We've got things on.
I'll speak for yourself, sure.
True. Okay.
My deadline's finished 2 weeks ago. But yeah.
Yeah, I've got stuff to do. But oh well.
I have other things to.
Well, what happened this week though? Aside from us lamenting our current state of affairs.
Yeah, that was me, just in the Adamson or the Wape Out or something, just necking pints, lamenting my.
What's it all about?
My lack of company. Yeah, tragic stuff, really.
Shall I go first?
Yeah, go on then.
Go on, Sarah.
So, this week in 1986, 3 weeks after a Lebanese magazine reported that the United States had been secretly selling arms to Iran, divisive, Attorney General Edwin Meese reveals that proceeds from the arms sales were illegally diverted to the anti-communist Contras in Nicaragua. Because that makes it better, Edwin Meese.
Yes, of course, Nicaragua, of course, that we discussed last week, I believe, that somewhat unstable Central America.
Is this the second time in a row that Nicaragua has come up?
You feel sorry? I do apologise for any Nicaraguan listeners out there. We really don't
the
hate your
nichest
country.
of audiences.
It's really not that we hate your country.
Hi Guys History is like #1 streamed podcast in Nicaragua. Just
Yeah. Well, I mean, who can forget the football war, wasn't it, between Nicaragua and El Salvador, which I believe was El Salvador invaded Nicaragua after a World Cup qualifier or something. But
maybe I can't remember. I know there was Costa Rica got invaded after Google Maps misprinted a satellite image. So I think it might have been Nicaragua who invaded it.
I'm pretty certain it was.
They invaded it just so they could just to make sure. Even though actually, interestingly, Costa Rica doesn't actually have an army. So that,
oh no! Well, that probably didn't end.
I think
too
it
well.
got resolved peacefully in the end. But yeah, that. So apologies to Nicaragua for getting dragged
Just
into.
get Kayla Navas to keep out the attacking forces.
Brian Ruiz unpicking the door. Joel Campbell on the right cutting in.
That great quarterfinal team of the 2014 World Cup.
Yeah,
Who
Costa Rican. I didn't anticipate Costa Rican football being the main feature of today's episode.
Us talking
No,
about
exactly.
A history radio show.
So I'll take one away from
we
1940. Romania joining the Axis powers. In hindsight, obviously probably not the best decision on behalf of the Romanians. But obviously they fought hard. Sadly, lost out and were invaded by the Russians. And duly spent.
No one talk about Stalingrad.
Stalingrad. What's that got to do with Romania?
Yeah. A lot. So
Really? Oh.
yeah. So
please do enlighten us.
interestingly, so whilst the Germans were fighting in Stalingrad itself, in the city in 1942 to 43, whilst the Germans were fighting in the city itself, they left the flanks to be guarded by the Romanians and sort of Hungarians and the Bulgarians and their other allies.
Oh, really?
However, consequently, during that winter, the Russians launched a massive counteroffensive against these non-German Axis forces, and they consequently absolutely crumbled. It didn't last at all. Hence, the German Sixth Army under General von Paulus was completely surrounded and just completely annihilated.
Wow.
So don't mention Stalingrad to the Germans or the Romanians.
Oh, well, I wasn't going to mention Stalingrad to the Germans. I think it's already a pretty sore point for them.
But specifically the Romanians, apparently they don't remember that fondly.
I wouldn't
Okay.
think they would.
No.
I think they'd be quite upset by that.
Yeah. And then also this week, I think Sarah will know more about this than I do, but apparently in 1783, the last British soldiers left New York as after the revolution.
It's kind of about an acceptance, almost a significant symbolic moment, really, in in American history, one would say.
It was big. It was big. We were happy to see you guys.
The end of
leave.
British
Sorry.
interference. Well, I mean, aside from the War of 1812, the burning down of the White House, but yeah, leaving New York, significant
what?
times.
I've always been confused about that. Was there?
About the burning of
Yeah, what 1812 and all
That was like a secondary independence war kind of thing.
But they were already independent, weren't they?
Yeah, it was just the Americans were getting a bit pissy about the British blocking their trade routes and stuff, and thought.
Yeah, 1812 was literally like a trade problem.
Yeah.
But weren't we busy?
But
with-
obviously, it gave rise to the current U.S. national anthem, of course, the Star Spangled Banner,
Yeah, that's
which
true.
originated from that war.
Facts.
Well, didn't also what was it? Weren't we too busy with Napoleon at the time? Didn't we have other things to
I
do?
think you guys were kind of always busy.
I mean,
The French.
let's also remember that America was not the power it is today back then. That was just, I think
Yeah.
Britain could quite easily, send a couple of resources,
Tiny little
a few
outlet.
resources to deal with the Yanks,
Just
whilst
out
focusing most fire on Napoleon and his several attempted invasions of the
You
UK.
really tried.
Mm,
Yeah.
indeed.
What's that one when they landed in Wales and they just basically just got bevved up and then
Did they?
Yeah. It's quite a good one actually.
Did they actually land in Wales?
Yeah, and it didn't end well though. They were stranded there, and the army just took to loads of wine, and they eventually got set upon by Welsh farmers. Again, I'm probably not doing the real event justice here, but look it up. It did happen.
We
Yeah.
swear Napoleon was actually successful at his whole.
I don't know if Napoleon himself got bevved in Cardiff or Swansea, wherever he was.
Anyone put it past
Yeah,
Swansea.
The
Cheeky trip up-
Leffley Sesh.
Yeah, cheeky trip up to Wrexham for the boys.
Away days in Wrexham with the
Away
boys.
days in Wrexham.
Napoleon and
Pops
French
across the
lads.
border to Shrewsbury.
Hereford as well. Yeah, no. So the whole
no.
West Midlands.
Oh no. Well, either way, that was kind of what happened this week. But not all this happened this week. In the past.
Sorry, no. Napoleon didn't get drunk in Wales
This week.
Wait, he didn't?
No.
I hope not. Anyway.
Sorry, I had to clarify that. But what we were actually hoping to talk about was I don't know, how did we come across this, Sarah? This theme.
This theme. I think it was because I've been obsessed with this quote since I used to watch Sherlock, and he said it in one episode, and I was like, oof. So the quote was, they're like in this cab, and I haven't seen Sherlock in years, but they're in a cab, and Sherlock just goes, "Come on, Watson, like the wheel turns, nothing is ever new." In turn, because I think Watson was talking about how it was similar to a different case, and so he was like, "Yeah, the wheel turns, nothing is ever new," and that's kind of an expression that's usually talked about in history. I mean, we were talking about Napoleon earlier. Look at Napoleon. Yeah. Hitler made the same mistake Napoleon did in trying to invade Russia, where the weather fights for you.
Against you, I think, isn't it?
Well, not if you're Russian.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
she was
the
talking about
perspec-
from a Russian
the perspective was-
From a Russian
the
point of
perspective
view.
was
Sorry,
unclear,
I'm in
I'd like
Russian
to say in that
society,
statement.
I automatically switched to Russian.
Sorry, carry on, please.
And so it was like a concept that got me thinking, because that is like a well-known expression, like a well-known concept, is that history kind of is doomed to repeat itself.
So you're trying to draw parallels with Napoleon and maybe the Nazis of 1940,
Or
maybe in their
41.
41.
Sorry.
Oh no,
Sorry.
no. Wasn't
Sorry.
Oh yeah, Operation Barbarossa. You're right. Yeah, sorry.
June-
Sorry, everyone.
June 1941. We have extremely high standards of, well,
Yep. So I'm sad to say I will not be returning to HIGuys history next week. I've been replaced.
and then
after
there
that
were two.
humongous blunder there, never to be returned.
Slanderous.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of how we came across it. It is sort of like an interesting concept to think about. That I mean, it's also quite big for fashion if you think about it. You boys might not know too much about that.
I'm really curious to see how you link this back.
To history.
I'm
Yeah.
about to. Because look at how fashion sort of goes in circle. Like right now,
I really haven't been
everything that
keeping
was
track.
born in like the 70s or the 80s is totally coming back. And
Does
so
it?
it's
Did you
Yes.
know?
No. I don't know if you noticed my flared trousers that I wore yesterday.
I'm actually
Wow.
considering a mullet right now, actually. You know,
Yeah. Not sure about that.
just as
particular
I
assertion
peruse
there.
around the top floor of the library and I notice, oh wow, could be an ABBA concert. This. I haven't noticed that personally, but
Yeah. No. Dress up as ABBA for Halloween. Just wear it around now. Everywhere.
I mean,
Doesn't bat an eyelid.
I mean, I'll take your word for it, Sarah. That in fashion, that
you guys will have to.
things come back.
I don't know if we do.
Do I?
No. Sorry.
I don't know.
Not convinced there.
I think you do, because
It's a no bueno
that's
from
not
us.
anything.
No, I think we'll get by without fashion
Yeah, thanks.
trends.
I'm sure we'll survive. Thanks though. It was
Look, boys. The point of the matter
you
is
tried.
that
You tried.
I think this is not like a divisive thing. Maybe it is.
I have the claim pile open.
Are you going to try and
ready
make
for-
fashion divisive here?
No, I'm saying the subject in general is not really. I mean, I don't know. I think it's kind of true. Like, history does tend to repeat itself, even if you learn about it. Because usually it's just sort of like those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. But if you think about it, I think those that do know history are still doomed to repeat it.
I believe it was Mark Twain who said, "History never repeats itself, but it does sometimes rhyme," which I think is a really nice little quote there. You know, I don't think there's ever an instance of, you know, history obviously just there being a complete carbon copy. I think maybe there are times when it does, certain themes are revisited, but never, I think, could you say that there's been an instance where, you know, a completely identical event has taken place, say 200, 300 years after happening. I mean, certainly as well, after a couple of generations of a certain event, you get to a stage where, you know, no one really remembers what happened. You know, that the tales of it maybe have become somewhat...
in the popular memory.
In the popular memory, the tale have become somewhat distorted maybe, and it's almost just forgotten maybe what actually happened. And that is, I'm thinking of maybe, I don't know, say the rise of fascism in the 1930s. No one can remember that now.
No.
And maybe some would argue it's coming back around because people can't remember the kind of the devastation.
Or trends that have been linked to it, yeah.
And how it ended. Yeah, obviously trends that have been linked to it.
Well, I think, like, it's also that you can use tools that someone in the past used to make whatever you want with it. So, like, I think you guys are talking about nationalism and how that's on the rise right now. That is something that you could say, which was never discussed this earlier today, is a tool that they got from, you know, the 20th century. That they saw.
Well, yeah, but also just using,
yeah.
not even the 20th, just using precedents from history. You know, Mussolini liked to draw comparisons to his burgeoning Italian Empire and the Roman Empire. You know, just as justification for his actions, and trying to sort of, you know, rebuild kind of a great era of you know, Italian hegemony.
But it's...
And
I guess we'll get into the discussion later on about do we or do we not disagree with it. But is that to call nationalism then like a question of historical, like a means of determining historical development, nationalism as a theory? Or is it just a factor that has influenced the history of the last 200, 300 years then? Because in my mind, it's more a factor or perhaps a trend of what's been going on since the 1800s, 1700s. And I'm not sure it's really something as akin to like Marxism or great man theory in which it looks at the cyclicalness and the repetitive aspects of history, if that makes sense. I'm just curious about where the nationalism part fits into the discussion.
I think nationalism is like a tool that people use, and I think is one of those things that they can look back at history and be like, that was effective. Okay, we can use that again. Like it's
a methods of justification.
Yeah, it's
I believe
it's
certain
just,
actions.
It's a way to bring about an end. I think is the best.
You look at all
way to
the sort of the regimes of over the past 200 years, autocratic regimes. They placed nationalism. They gave it huge kind of weight as a means of justifying what they were doing, and try and make a diversion from, you know, the subjugation of their own people.
So allusions to history.
Yeah,
then.
a distraction. Yeah.
So allusions to history.
Trying to make out that the people they were subjugating were actually part of a bigger thing, and what they were doing was for the country, you know, and whatever.
So,
and that's something you see over and over and over.
Absolutely,
again.
yeah.
You're seeing in the States right now, "Make America Great Again."
I don't know if you can compare the States right now to Stalinist Russia,
Well,
but
no,
okay.
I was thinking more
my
not-
point is the strategy is similar.
I was thinking more like, for example, the Third Reich. It alludes to a second and a first.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
So it alludes to a time when I think the First Reich is. I think they put it around 10th century.
Yeah.
I think Otto II really tested me there, but I think, and then the Second Reich is obviously Bismarck,
Yeah.
etc., etc. And so it's an allusion to we've been great. So presumably then the nationalism question is more, look how great our nation was in the past, and as justification for that. Okay, okay, I see that then.
Yeah.
As a repetitive theme.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's one of the key examples of history being cyclical, the use of nationalism.
I think probably a theory that really delves into the question of repetitive history or cyclical history is possibly Marxism.
Ooh.
But
yeah.
as I'm thinking about it, is it not more linear than it is
Well, I think
cyclical?
Marxists would argue that there's always been a subjugation of the working class throughout. That's just been a constant throughout
I guess
history.
that repeats itself.
There's
doesn't it?
there's no repetition there. It's just always been that way. There's no real room for kind of cyclical.
Well, you'll find maybe like the class below the ruling elite may switch occasionally.
Occasionally, but as a general trend.
But the people at the very bottom, in their minds,
the peasants or the serfs or whatever they're referred to in their own cultures. Yeah, whatever they're referred to in their.
Differently than I would look at this as Marxism is something that in and of itself is cyclical.
What's he saying? It
The theory,
comes back around, the theory itself.
Yeah, it comes back around because I think it sees different eras of popularity, and there are different times when people are more interested in it. I'm not saying like now everyone's into Marxism, but I think if you were to track political trends, you would see sort of waves almost of
waves of Marxism.
Waves of Marxism, waves when people go to the left, waves when people go to the right.
That's so true, yeah.
Like, it just comes back around again. It's sort of like, and my dad and I have talked about this, that it's the concept of humans seem to try something and it will not work. Like, just not good. And then a generation will die out, 2 generations will die out.
Yeah, as well as talking about earlier.
Be like, oh, now we got it, and they'll do it again.
People, yeah, they'll completely forget the mistakes that were made,
exactly.
and then yeah.
So you think Marxism is a case in point of that, of humans forgetting their mistakes?
It's like a type of thing that humans.
Well, I think it's more that they forget the mistakes of Marxism in itself.
Yeah.
The fact that it completely
like,
failed to be embedded within a culture.
Exactly. That it just isn't effective.
So this is alluding to the communism or Marxism hasn't worked because it's never been tried properly.
Yeah,
argument.
exactly. They're like, oh, we'll do it better. Like, we've got it. That kind of thing. And it's sort of the idea that I think humans have, which is cute. That they'll do it.
Naive
better.
for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That like this time around will be different. This time around they've learned
Yeah.
from their mistakes.
Or they'll even just conveniently forget how
exactly.
Marxism ended. That
Or which aspects of the theorem are not applied in practice.
Yeah, exactly.
Regarding industrial societies and things like that.
Or it's like the idea of taking your friend's homework and being like, I'll change it up a little. And that's
that iconic meme. Yeah.
Someone sounds bitter.
Yeah.
Feel about Marxism? Let me know in the comments.
This is a sharing forum here.
So I think, I can see how that. I think great man theory is another one. So I'm not sure if you guys know. Harry, you should certainly know this. Sarah probably does. The historian A.J.P. Taylor.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Taylor,
I'm getting shakes of the head, baby.
Oh, thanks, Sean. It's a snake. God. Wait to reveal to our listeners that I didn't know, like, paying attention in HI 2001.
No, this was not HI. This was,
you see, look, shows how much I know.
This is World War One, World War Two.
Really?
This is the IB. A.J.P. Taylor was like that.
Yeah,
one
this is true.
person
Oh, yes,
you
the IB,
didn't
that
know
exam that I
before.
just did take. Wow.
Yeah, the International Baccalaureate worships A.J.P. Taylor as a giant.
It's because you can just like. There's one IB meme that I really love. It's like the Salt Bay meme where they like it's like A.J.P. Taylor and it's the guy sprinkling him into his IB exam, and that's really true, if I'm being honest, because it was like the one guy that he had such a clear and concise Germany did it view that like.
Yeah.
It
Well,
was just easy.
the thing with A.J.B. Taylor, this historian, is that he said that you could track all of European history over the last 150 years in the lives of 3 people.
Who would those people be?
Could we guess, maybe?
So what was
three
what was
people,
the time period?
150 years. So 18...
In
European
European history.
Definitely Bismarck.
Okay, 1850. So we got... So what's your guess, Sarah? Bismarck,
I'm calling Bismarck.
Lenin, I'm going for.
Lenin.
Hitler?
Nope,
No.
not Hitler.
I mean, we've got 2 out of 3.
You've got 2 of them, actually. So you got 2 of them very quickly, Bismarck and Lenin.
So was this person like... it's like 20 questions here. Did he give rise to a movement?
I wouldn't say so, no.
More of a philosopher?
No. not
Politician?
philosopher. Yes, technically.
Wilson.
No, not Wilson.
Stupid League of Nations.
Hey.
This is European.
A
Saz.
noble endeavor.
Yeah.
No, he tried in Europe.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
He's come up a lot today.
Oh.
Stalin?
Not Stalin. What did you say, Sarah?
Napoleon.
Yeah, Napoleon.
Ah.
So A.G.P. Taylor
Oh, okay.
thinks that you can judge all of European history for the last 150 years in the lives of 3 people.
Oh, yeah.
And that if you just look at what Bismarck did, what Lenin did, and what Napoleon did. Oh, sorry, 200 years.
Yeah, I was going to
Oops,
say.
Oops, I got that wrong. Sorry, everyone. 200 years.
Wow, wait, I was gonna say.
In fairness, it would have been 150
None of
years.
us took math modules. Well,
In fact,
Math studies.
hey, leave me alone. So I guess for Taylor, it was 150 years because he was
Okay.
writing in the 60s.
well, that makes sense.
So that's his. I guess it's more of a counter to cyclical history. Is that it's great men who define eras and who dictate the terms of events, and not in fact economic conditions or things like that. So people have used this argument for Churchill. Without Churchill, Britain would have be a Nazi colony or whatever. People have.
True.
I was reading today that Mehmed II,
Oh my God.
conqueror of Istanbul, 1453.
Right, yeah, we get it. You study
Especially
Ottoman.
with
You know,
Mehmed II.
yeah.
Some have argued that without his sort of authoritarian, absolutist approach to being a sultan and his obsession with Constantinople, that the Ottoman Empire would not be what it was. So, sorry, I think you got to get closer to the mic.
Sorry, Mehmed II irritates me.
Yeah.
So,
Come on, Sarah. That's all here grumbling.
maybe that's not more cyclical, but that is certainly if we're talking about theorems of that try and kind of predict and make sense of it all, the great person theory is one of those.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. I've got to say, I was quite embarrassed that I didn't know about that theory. It's looking back on it, it's quite an obvious one.
I don't think it's as established as the others. Like, I don't think it's like a school of thought.
Well, no, but like more that it just sounds exactly like what it
is exactly. It does what it says on the tin.
It literally does. Yeah, it is the Heinz of history theories, I believe.
It does exactly what it says on the tin.
That's not Heinz. Sorry, I take that back.
So perhaps now, should we have a little break, maybe? Now that we've kind of talked about, or maybe
I think a break now would be very appropriate. Yeah.
very,
no.
So this song, Sarah, you should know this song very well. Not only because it's very popular in your home country, but also for the courses that you study. I'm now about to play the Campaign Trail song for a Mr.
Right. My dad,
Ronald Reagan.
Mr. Ronald Reagan.
you know this song, Dad. And we're back.
Hello, we are back.
Yes.
Sure, you want to take away us and the relevance
for
of
those
that?
who did not know, that was Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen. The reason why I brought up Reagan, Sarah, was because...
He's my leader for leader personality.
yes, so
No,
she covers
God.
him a lot in her course. And this was actually his campaign song,
Not surprised.
which is ironic, really ironic, as I will
Ironic. Wow.
as I will go on to explain.
Okay.
So it's often used, this song, as it's at all the big, it's at the Super Bowl and the big rallies and things. And sorry, just
I'm not hating on Springsteen, by the way. I should say I was raised with Springsteen.
so this it's quite ironic, really, because it's
Yeah.
often taken as this very patriotic song. It's used at all major events and etc. etc. But in fact, when you actually break down the lyrics, it's realistically a critique of the state of the working class in America and condemning the maltreatment of veterans after the Vietnam War. So if you look at, so we'll just go through the lyrics rather quickly. So it opens realistically by, it's not going to be apparent immediately. It's going to be a happy song.
Yeah.
It starts with, born down in a dead man's town. The first kick I took was when I hit the ground. So immediately,
Yeah.
Sets
hit-
the scene.
yeah.
It's not, yeah.
So
yeah.
from birth, literally from birth, immediately, downtrodden. It goes on to say, got into a little hometown jam, or a scrap, essentially. So they put a rifle in my hand, sent me off to a foreign land to go and kill the yellow man. So this refers to a practice of allegedly prisoners being sent out to Vietnam and used to fight in the war. And also there's a little bit of racial profiling in there, which indicates an understanding of why they were there and what they were doing.
Yeah.
And then finally, again, more of the chorus, and then come back to the refinery. Hiring man says, son, if it was up to me. Went down to the VA, or Veterans Association. He said, son, don't you understand? So this refers to now the veterans after Vietnam being unable to get any jobs at all. And not only that, they don't have, the Veterans Association, the VA, doesn't have any funding. So what's ironic about Reagan using this as his campaign song is that the VA's funding under Reagan was slashed, as was healthcare benefits to veterans under his presidency. So hence the irony of him using this song in his campaign.
No, there is a bit irony there.
So
obviously, about his campaign motto as well. Does anyone know what that is? Or
no, not good.
Let's make America great again.
Really?
That's true, actually.
Wow.
I found that out in like
Again, cyclical history, guys. Come on.
Actually,
It's like we planned it.
Oh my god, yeah. To one of our listeners, got a high five from Bruce Springsteen when he was 13. Yeah, I met Bruce Springsteen when I was 7.
Well, he ends his song with "Down in the shadow of the penitentiary, out of gas fires at the refinery. I'm 10 years down the burning road," because it's released 10 years after the end of the Vietnam War. And the final line is, "Nowhere to run, ain't got nowhere to go."
Yeah, so quite a foreboding finish there.
Yeah, it's a song that is heavily misinterpreted over there in the States, but I had to cover it in English class. And this guy
I'm sure you tore it to shreds, sure.
Well, the teacher tore it to shreds. He was
like a defense lawyer tearing to shreds.
Mr. Sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Sir. So I thought that was our song of the week.
Yeah, excellent choice.
How it refers down to history. But Sarah, you have something to say about technology, don't you?
I did. I think I kind of touched on this earlier in my sort of explanation that Marxism, everyone was kind of like, but we'll do it better. I think the argument could be made that we especially see that with technology today, because I think in this day and age, we have drones. I had a drone earlier today that I got to use.
What?
Oh yeah.
Use drones? Did you fly over like a Middle Eastern state, or
did you have a look at Islamabad whilst you were there?
Anyways, boys, not the point.
Dark secrets of Sarah's life here. God.
She works
wow.
for
Revelations here on HIGuys history.
Oh no. So what were you do? What has drones got to do with it?
Okay, so my point is, obviously we didn't have drones when you were Napoleon trying to invade Russia.
Ladies and gentlemen, the award for outstanding historical
assessment. I know.
Yes,
thank you very much. Thank you. We didn't have drones when Napoleon tried to do it. We didn't have drones when Hitler tried to do it. Today's day and age, we do have drones.
Arguably, sorry.
We have other
they have like planes and stuff which they can view enemy land and like
back to the point. The point is,
not mine, though.
The point is, does tech stop history from being cyclical because things can be different because you have the ability to change them?
I think it just means that technology is used in different ways, which can mirror old historical methods and tactics.
No, but look at Osama bin Laden. That was a high tech operation. It required a ton of.
What aspect of Osama bin Laden?
What are you talking about? Is this 9/11 you're talking about?
His assassination.
His assassination.
Yeah.
Do you call it assassination? I don't know what you'd call it.
It was an assassination. A taking out. A silencing.
They took him out. The point is, when they took him out, that was like a high tech operation. And I feel like that would, first of all, not have worked at any other period of time because the guy was hiding out somehow.
In his house, opposite the Pakistani military academy.
No one somehow we did the Navy SEALs.
No one knew about it though. It was a complete mystery.
Back to the point. The point is, in that case, now that we have technology, now that we have the ability to just do more impressive stuff, because we have high tech to do it faster, quieter, smoother. Is that going to stop history from being
I would argue.
Can we write the mistakes that we would have made if we didn't have technology?
I would say there's an argument to be made for technology actually making those kind of things tougher. Like you look at the military operation, the efforts they had to go to keep that completely sort of secret and underground and try and keep it away from getting leaked to the press somehow. It makes it a lot tougher to execute. Arguably it would have been a lot easier to sort of keep it under the radar in the era kind of pre-social media and pre-technology here.
Yeah, I'm not sure. There's a risk here of sounding sort of teleological and progressive that history is destined to constantly go upwards and will become constantly more technologically advanced.
All right, Francis Fukuyama, you done that.
But does this technology argument, has this not always been the case? With Napoleon and Hitler, did Hitler not think, we've solved the problem of Napoleon because now we have armoured personnel and tanks and airplanes.
We won't make the same mistakes.
We won't make the same mistakes because the technology is superior.
Well, now we're going to get a nuclear bomb, so,
Or a nuclear weapon.
I guess, to that point, look at the I love to talk about this. The Maginot Line in France. Or the
Maginot Line.
Yeah.
So pretentious. God, just call it what it is. God.
This is what it is.
The Maginot Line. Yes, thank you.
The point is, back to the pimples. So,
The
Maginot
G's
Line,
silent,
that was
actually,
literally
oh.
France being like, this is the highest technology. Like, we are building 5-star luxury bunkers for these guys in case the Germans come back. It is the height of tech. They spent millions on it, and then the Germans walked through the forest.
Yeah,
The same way they went the first
They didn't
time.
bank on the,
exactly. Literally killed.
They didn't bank on
My
the German
favorite
tanks going through the
historical
Ardennes,
thing
but
ever.
yeah.
If you know me, you know how much I love laughing at that. But the point is,
Yeah, that's all she ever goes on
is
about.
it because that's true? I love telling people that they're as useful to me as the Maginot Line. You can all cop that. So, did tech hurt them there? Do we think? Do we think because technology was around, they were like, we got this? Like,
No, I think it was more just a kind of a misplacement of technology, if you know what I mean.
Strategic incompetence.
Like, yeah,
possibly.
technology is only as good as the people who, utilize it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm not convinced by this. I'm not convinced by this technology argument. I must admit. I think, well, personally, I think the whole idea of cyclical and repetitive history is nonsense.
You think?
Yeah,
Wow.
I
Cutting there from
well,
Shorus.
well, I don't.
Go
Well,
in on him, sure.
okay,
Hard-hitting
maybe
stuff.
on a very pernickety level, it literally cannot. It cannot repeat itself.
No, yeah.
can.
As we said earlier.
It
It can't literally sort of identically.
Well, no, okay. I'm sure
It
you know,
cannot
Roger
identically
running from one point in one location is not the same thing, but like thematically, it definitely can.
Okay, that's different though. Themes. We're talking about themes of history. Not saying can
That's
history
still-
repeat
it's-
itself.
But that is a form of history repeating itself.
How so?
Because like you're basically when we're talking about history repeating itself, you're either talking about like nationalism, like the whole "Make America Great Again" thing, where no doubt maybe it wasn't Trump, but I'm sure it was someone on his team who was like, "Hey, that was a slogan that people used that was effective. Let's bring it back."
But you're not considering the vastly different socioeconomic and political factors that are taking place when that slogan is being used. Reagan, when he uses it, is using it in a far different context to when Trump's using it. For
Yeah, I imagine
Oh, I'm
Reagan
well
used it
aware.
more in a. Well, no, I think
I'm
Reagan
well
used it
aware.
more in like a military sense because they were seen to be kind of he kind of pretended they were
He's
kind of
got the-
falling behind the Soviets
Yeah,
and the
'cause, you know,
and the nuclear race.
communism,
Trump, however, was
yada,
using it
yada,
far in
yada.
a sort of far more in a socio-economic kind of sense.
Does
Exactly.
Reagan say great or great again?
Great again, I think.
Yeah. Great again.
I think it's
Because he was at the time they were considered to have sort of in the
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter era they were considered to have been a bit too soft on
Exactly.
Russia. They were seen to be almost losing the Cold War. Who knows? Well, certainly Reagan played it that way to try and get votes, but
So
the truth was obviously very different.
So
but-
he's got the context of the Cold War for justifying his claims, whereas Trump is using 2 Obama presidencies as his backup, and a perceived failing of the working class and globalization.
But it's still the
Yeah.
same theme. It's still both of them are playing off Americans.
But the
being
context
like, wow,
in which
we're not...
they're being said is vastly different.
Yeah, but
and you
but
have to
they're
consider
still
that.
bringing it back. Like it's still someone being like, this was effective before in saying, okay, Americans are disheartened. We're gonna play off of that. We're gonna say it's okay, guys. We'll be great again, and we'll rise. And they're both doing the same thing. The reasons that they're doing it perhaps are different,
But
but,
if you're-
they're playing off the same concept.
The difficulty is if you're trying to ascertain the nature of American nationalism in the 21st and 20th century, then you can look at the whole MAGA frame and say, it started with Reagan and then Trump picked it up, and judge it as
but if you
one
think about it, lots of people in the
as
States
one.
compare Trump
So
to
no,
Reagan.
this is the problem though, because you're judging it as one homogenous group as between 1980 and 2018, and you're not carrying on like the particularities of those incidences and what was different between them, and within that you lead into generalization and poor history. That's
I think it
all
is
the
quite
case.
lazy to just
It is
blithely
very
kind
lazy
of.
history to just say that like
cast
it
them all
fully
in the same
repeats itself,
boat.
But I think it's also you're ignoring the fact that like in a lot of cases it does. That people try something that was tried before, and again, it's I think it's just sort of the concept that humans think they'll do it better this time. This is what we touched on earlier, like, and I think that's what tech plays a big role in. Is that they're sort of thinking, okay, well, invading Russia did not work for Napoleon, but I know what Napoleon did wrong. And we have tanks now. Napoleon didn't have tanks. So this is going to work out much better. It'll be much faster. It'll capitulate. We'll be done.
And
That's
yet,
what we're gonna
and
do.
as a consequence of that, it falls in this category as, you can't invade Russia in winter, or all you're helping to do is like perpetuate a myth of
I
like
could do a Russian accent. I could do that.
because
Soviet Russia.
Please don't.
all you're contributing then is kind of like homogenizing those two events, is saying Russian exceptionalism is a thing.
But it's not saying Russian exception. It's saying that in both cases they thought they could do something. In Hitler's case, he looked at it sort of as, yeah, it's been done, because you have to believe someone was like, yo, dude, Napoleon tried that, didn't go so well. Like, you gotta believe someone told him that. It was like, when we last
but
invaded
that
Russia.
would have
don't know.
absolutely no effect.
Yeah,
on him.
exactly. Because
Yeah.
Hitler would be like, it's okay, we're better now. Like, we're doing the exact same thing then, but
And I bet they
but we're better.
probably would have honestly have believed that as well.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
the Nazis were on a
Like-
roll at this point. Bear in mind.
Well, yeah, and they have this idea of, again, different from Napoleon, using this idea of like ethnic superiority as
Yeah.
justification, Aryan supremacy, which is like this is the thing, isn't it? It's the differences at the time of like what motivated them then from now, and how it plays off those events. This is why I don't think
But I
think
think
it's
in both cases, they're both motivated by the fact that they both want Russia. They want the glory of having Russia. So one of the biggest motivations there is the same. And yeah, they were in different places.
I don't
like,
think you can
they
characterize
had
their
the Tsars
motivations
in
as the
power,
same.
and then they had the Soviet Union in power. But like, and also in both cases, Napoleon and Hitler both were like, oh, it's okay, Russia will leave you alone. And Russia was like, okay, cool, great, no worries. And then in both cases, Napoleon and Hitler, once they'd finished whatever else they were working on, were like, oh, time to go to Russia, all right. And they both invaded. And in both cases, the powers that be,
Yeah.
in Russia and the Soviet Union, same thing, I guess, fled. And they just ran. And then they were like, oh, we should say, like, there are a lot of similarities.
But there are also a lot of
There
differences.
are also a lot of differences. But my point is, there are enough similarities they can be like, okay, maybe if Hitler had studied what Napoleon did and been like, ooh, the supply lines, problematic.
Then what? Would he have not invaded? Would he have done
Maybe
it
he would've
differently?
waited.
I think the temptation would
Maybe
have been
he
too
would've
great.
waited,
I
'cause
still think he would have
What
invaded.
killed Napoleon is that he was fighting on a war on multiple fronts. And what killed Hitler is that he was fighting a war on multiple fronts.
Yeah.
So his forces were too spread out. In both cases, it would have been smarter for both leaders to wait until they finished literally everyone else and then go for Russia. But in both cases, they were like, oh, it's okay. Russia will fall quickly.
They're both
because
kind of
not
feeling
gonna see it
invincible at the
coming
time.
because
They
we
were
have a
both,
deal.
yeah.
So in your eyes, then, if Hitler had just picked up a history book, he would have won World War II.
I mean, he was also kind of a moron with, like, strategic stuff. He was not very smart. But I'm saying...
Surround himself with yes men as well.
True.
Kind of, yeah.
But I'm saying
Yeah.
history in that case repeated itself enough that you don't know what would have happened if he'd looked at what Napoleon did and been like, wow, did not go well, and they were, like, the Nazi superpower of that time.
I think like this just shows that like you have to assume so much. I mean, also it falls into the what if history, which I find
It does fall.
I find
falls into what
abhorrent.
history,
But
but I think to say that neither event is at all similar,
no, they're not.
they are.
They're not.
It's the same thing. It's the same setup.
They're completely different.
No, it's literally the same setup.
No, it's not.
I don't know if it's the
Yes, it
same
is.
setup. That's
It's really not.
Yeah, in both cases, they were like, Russia, we're chill.
One is based off ethnic superiority.
No, but
the
my
other
point
is based off
their interactions
imperialism.
with Russia are similar.
But they're fundamentally motivated by two different things.
But their motivations don't matter. They're
The context in
actions
which they're
this
happening.
case.
The assertion of the motives, I think, has been simplified greatly.
But they're doing the same thing. They're both.
They're doing the same thing, but then
But
when
then
that
it is
case,
repeating
in
itself
that
because they're
ca-
doing the same
then you can
thing.
say literally anything and anything repeats itself. Oh, if he invaded a castle or had a
No,
cavalry
but this is
charge.
like,
Yeah.
They befriend Russia to then stab Russia in the back, get wars on too many fronts. Their forces, in both cases, just did not have the supply lines to make that work.
yeah. So
In both cases, they froze to death, and most people did not return home. Like,
But
So,
what-
so some general themes are the same, but I think when you get down to like a more
the minute
in-depth level
course,
of
you cannot
analysis,
be like,
I feel
"All
there are
right,
far more different
it
things
is
at
the
play here.
exact same event happening twice. But I think the point of the quote isn't to say that, like, anything that happens once is going to happen again. It's to say that there are patterns that you can
Yeah.
discern.
I suppose.
But you
I,
could blend that on human thought. You could blend that on a million things. And yes, there are tiny differences. But the point is that human patterns in a thought process. Repeat.
I suppose it just depends on your kind of perception of cyclical history. Whether you regard it as just general themes, like, invading Russia and failing, or actually far more specific, sort of pernickety kind of...
So I don't think you can be pernickety with it repeating itself. That's
Well, but I mean, if you are, then you can say history never repeats itself.
I think it's down to how you approach history. If, like, you can do, like, a history of human civilization in 500 pages.
And you can find general themes that repeat
And be
themselves.
like, well, look at bad men, or...
Bad
or
men.
yes men, or climate change, or economic events. But I think if you
climate change.
I think if you really want to understand...
Are you a denier, sure?
If you really want to...
It's going to freeze over again. Second ice age. Third ice age.
The reference in my history post to promote this program was that the Bosphorus froze over in 1622. That was why it was such a bad winter. But
sadly, global warming hadn't quite taken hold then. But yeah,
the final point I wanted to make is that I think it's down to your approach to history, that you can look for generalities and trends and patterns and say, this is interesting, and how can this tell us about the future? Or you can look at the context in which specific events happened, why they happened, and ascertaining why that event in that context happened, and not try and draw any other conclusion to anything else, because otherwise you fall into the traps that I've outlined.
Well, I'm glad we managed to, come across a sort of an uneasy sort of truce here at the end of what is cyclical history.
And I think at that point, then, it's time for our Freaks of the Week.
All right, that much loved segment. Who wants to start us off?
Boys, why don't you go?
Deafening silence over there means I'll probably have to take the reins on this one. Right, so my freak of the week, Zhu Haojiao, the 11th emperor of the Ming dynasty, ruled from 1505 to 1521 in Ming, China. Came to the throne when he was 14, was a notorious womanizer, known for converting an old zoo into a... basically just like a whorehouse for loads of like pretty women that he could, just kind of go and visit whenever he fancied. Even though many of them actually ended up dying of starvation and poor sanitation, so not great. He also burned down one of his palaces due to the misplacement of gunpowder during the Lantern Festival. And most famously, I love this one. His death, he was in the Grand Canal in China and fell into the canal owing to drunkenness. And then several months later died from complications of some chemicals he may have consumed from the Grand Canal. So yeah, I'm sure we can all relate to that one there, Jew. But that's my freak of the week. Yeah,
that's quite funny. Sarah, have you got one or?
Mine's like it's a historical concept freaky thing of the week, which I think is funny.
Ooh, that's a first.
Let me see if I can explain.
This isn't very cyclical, Sarah.
Yeah, it is.
It's supposed to be people.
I'm trying to be new. So basically, if you guys know who Charles Dickens and Alexandre Dumas are.
Charles Dickens, I think I've heard of him.
So
he comes about.
But now and then, like in passing,
I hate you both.
Not the most famous British author of all time.
Claim,
probably.
That's in the claim pile.
That is in the claim pile. They're sitting on the other side of the radio thing. Or I would smack them. Anyways, so Charles Dickens used to get paid by the word, which is why he would write like intense descriptions of literally everything, and he would describe it like in just minute detail because he was literally just getting paid by the word. Whereas Alexandre Dumas was getting paid by the line. So if you read Dumas instead of Dickens, where he just describes everything, Dumas is like all dialogue because he would just do like a line like, "Where are we going next?" Next line. What do you mean? Next line. I mean, where are we going? Like the next line. I think that's quite funny that both of them are like two of the most famous authors, and because of how they were paid, that completely affected their writing styles. Because would Dumas have written more description if he'd been paid by that? Would Dickens have written more dialogue if he'd been paid by that? We'll never know. It's like a freaky concept.
Proving once again that every day is in fact a school day.
You're all here to learn.
Socio-economic freak of the week.
And to end it, my freak of the week is, I kind of grimace even at the prospect of talking about him. It's a certain Russian monk.
Oh my god! Literally, I'm so mad. I've been saving this for the entire semester to use when I was like really down and I really just needed to go off on a historical figure. If you know me and you're listening,
sound like you were down today, Sarah. It would have been the perfect example of a time to use it, but okay.
You will know he is my least favorite historical figure ever, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah.
Go ahead, George.
So this man
I hate him.
known as Rasputin.
God, I hate him. He makes me so mad.
So he was essentially a monk.
He was the worst.
Okay, Sarah, this isn't your freak of the week. Let's just
Yeah, I
simmer
know.
down
Shut
over there,
up,
please.
Uh,
I'm angry.
you got more angry about this than you did about cyclical history.
Oh my god.
So Rasputin managed to, as a monk, get into royal circles because it was alleged that he had a calming effect on Nicholas II, the Tsar of Russia, his son Alexei's hemophilia, which so he was said to have a very calming effect on the child and stops the condition. And so as a consequence of that, he got very close to Alexander's wife, Alexandra, the Tsarina.
How convenient.
Suspicious.
Who was kind of in power at the time, in de facto, because Nicholas thought it was a genius idea to take over at the front.
Despite he had like no.
Yeah,
Despite having no
poor
military-
Nicholas.
Despite
Yeah.
having no military experience whatsoever.
An unfortunate miscalculation.
So whilst he was
from the guy.
away, the Tsarina, known by the people as the German woman, and this random monk,
Nice and racist. I like that.
it's the Russians, not me, they kind of de facto ruled Russia for about 2-3 years.
And he was.
He was terrible,
Not good.
essentially. Russia went through about 5 prime ministers, 3 interior ministers, like 4 defense
He was
ministers.
also like a total like drug addict and womanizer and
Yes.
alcoholic, and
Yes.
if you Google a picture of him,
Womanizer,
that's also
alcoholic.
divisive.
Could he fit into a certain clothes?
Yeah. Get him as a guest star.
But the real freakish aspect of him is how he died.
Oh, it's really
So in November,
This is incredibly freakish.
or December 1916, conveniently 2 months before the February Revolution, some noblemen decided that Rasputin has too much power in St.
He
Petersburg.
also kept trying to sleep with all of their wives, and they were like, "Stop that."
Yeah, they also didn't like that, but predominantly because he had too much power over the Tsar and the Tsarina. So they decided to kill him. So firstly, they put first time they put cyanide in his tea. That didn't kill him. So they then shot him
He
in the.
just like kept drinking it. He was like, "Yeah, good tea, guys."
Yeah.
So they lulled him there because they were like, "Yeah, one of our wives who you've been trying
Oh, yeah,
to sleep with
that was the funny
for
part.
ages, she's upstairs." And then they
Yeah,
had
surely this
Rasputin-
would have.
They had Rasputin go into this like.
This should have brought up some
sus
alarm
basement,
bells for him,
and they
surely,
were
at
like,
this point.
Sorry, there's a party going on upstairs. We'll get her. And it was like 2 of them running around upstairs and like, oh, like really, really loud, trying to make it sound like it was a full party. And then Rasputin's just downstairs, and they're like,
God,
"Here,
sounds
have
lit.
some
God,
tea
gotta get some
with
vodka in,
cyanide-
yeah.
Like with cyanide in it. He drinks it. He's like, that was good. Like, can I have more?
Yeah.
So who
Huh?
has tea for prees? Just as a
Yeah,
side
exactly.
note here.
So
Yeah.
they give him more. He drinks that again.
Yeah.
Still doesn't kill him.
Yeah.
They're like, the hell.
So-
He's like, where is she?
Yeah, and so eventually
So
they say
sad.
enough of this. So they shoot him in the chest.
Well, he tries to run away because eventually he's like,
He figures it
guys,
out.
this is really sus. Like, why have I been here for so long? She keeps
Where them
pumping me
girls
with
at,
tea.
huh?
So they shoot him in the chest. That doesn't kill him.
Nope, keeps running.
So they shoot him in the head. And that does kill him.
No, he doesn't. It doesn't.
Well-
Kind of
They
semi-kills
put
him,
him in a
doesn't
bag
it?
and then beat him with a brick.
Yeah.
And then they throw him in like a river, and they determined that it was like something stupid
Yeah.
about the river that killed him. Like it was not the brick, it was not the bullet wounds, it was not the cyanide.
Probably
Yeah,
just
so-
drowning. I mean,
yeah.
it was also pretty quite cold, I imagine,
Yeah,
as well.
so
in November.
there
in St.
was an
Petersburg.
autopsy done that was later disputed that alleged that there were ice particles found underneath his fingernails. So it's entirely possible that he might have somehow like tried to scrape his way out of the bag.
Oh wait,
Or-
really?
yeah, like
I
he
didn't
might
know
have
that.
tried to claw
Wow.
his way under the ice.
Oh, good
Although
lord.
that was later disputed. So yeah, kind of a freakish death
He
of
never
a.
died.
Incredibly freakish.
And
Freak,
that's
freakish
just part
person.
of why I
Perhaps the
hate
ultimate
him.
freak of the week.
He
though.
was also
He is
apparently
the ultimate
he was also apparently castrated upon his death.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, you know, can't have his corpse, chirp sing at his funeral.
Please like Google a picture of him. Even if you didn't hear any of that, you'll hate him just based off the picture. Like he looks creepy.
After my wham, and so I'll
He looks so
castrate you
disturbing.
at death. So yeah, that
Right,
was.
so with that, I
And
believe.
with that concludes our show for this week.
Yeah, no,
It's been a lot of fun
Yeah,
this one
thank you.
actually.
yeah, no, we're like, I didn't have high hopes, but this has been, yeah.
Cheers-
Like,
cheers,
only
Dino.
Shores and
Now and
Sarah,
then,
two
now and
players
then,
with
you know,
24/7.
I was
That's
was
pretty
unsure of our,
awful.
but you know, just like cyclical history, now and then we can produce a decent show. Just us
Apologies if
three.
You heard our other ones, which
Yeah.
yeah. Harry does not deem as
Who needs guest stars anyway?
Yeah.
Clearly,
No,
it's
we're
just,
chatty enough as it is.
yeah,
Indeed.
clearly.
Okay, so to play us off, I was bored doing some Ottoman reading today, and this came up.
Sure,
All
I
right,
guess I'm
guys.
disappointed you didn't do the Rasputin song.
No,
Oh yeah, you should have done that.
That was
Oh,
nearly
no.
played in my tutorial, and I nearly threw up.
You know, Jack sings that to me sometimes because he knows how much I hate Rasputin. It's like well documented my hatred of Rasputin.
Well, this is
It
not.
really triggers.
I think our listeners got sense, Sarah. Yeah.
Don't worry, this has nothing to do with Rasputin. Thanks for listening,
Excellent.
everyone.
Thank
See you next
you.
week.
See you next week.
See ya.